Hello, everybody. This is Jeremiah Riggins, and today I'm going to be taking the interview seat and replacing Paul because we're going to be interviewing Paul today. So, Paul, glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
All right. So, what we're going to do today is I'm going to interview Paul about a trip that he took to the Philippines many years ago, but it's a pretty good story. So, I'm going to be talking to Paul about that. So, kind of kick us off, one of the things I remember from all I remember from it, because it was so long ago, was I remember my mom being upset that my dad was leaving, and then she was watching Still Magnolias, I think, and started crying, and I thought something had happened to Dad or something had gone wrong while he was in the Philippines, and it was just Mom watching Still Magnolias. So that's kind of the piece I remember. And, we're a family of storytellers. And so I hope this will be a good story today. When I was a kid, this certainly wasn't my favorite story because for a 12-year-old, it's hard to compete with derailing trains. But definitely, as I've gotten older, this is by far one of my favorite stories that Paul has told. This is one of my definitely as an adult, this is one of my favorite stories that Paul's told. So. Without further ado, let's go ahead and start with that story. So, Paul, just to kind of kick us off, tell us how old were you when you went on this trip to the Philippines? Because I think I was trying to calculate and I couldn't figure it out. And then kind of give us the story of how you got to be on this trip.
Well, I was in my probably early 40s, late 30s or early 40s, probably. And what had happened, I had a good friend, Dad Evans, who's now deceased, and he told me that he had been solicited, given the opportunity to go on a world prayer tour, and the place he was going was the Philippines, and that he just told me, he called me one day and said, Mike, I need you to go somewhere for me. And I said, okay, Des, where? I'm gone. I'll go for you. Then I called him back and I said, Des, I forgot to ask, where am I going? And he said, you're going to the Philippines. I said, okay, fine. Now, the backdrop of the Philippines at this time was the fact that they just had like a 6-7 point or higher earthquake, and it had destroyed a lot of things in the Philippines, and it was still an active volcano in the sense of aftershocks and all that. And also, at this point in time, the communists were rising up and creating insurrection in the Philippines, and so the American embassy had issued a no travel advisory to go to the Philippines. So based upon those two things, God said, go to the Philippines, and I'm like, okay, I'll go to the Philippines. Because I really believe when God says it, it doesn't matter. He understands the circumstances more than we do. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, I'm gone. Now, I won't say that I was like, oh, wow, this is wonderful. I'm just saying, okay, God, you're sure? And people would ask me and say, don't you know it's dangerous to go to the Philippines right now with what's happening? And I said, yeah, I do know. And they said, well, you sure God said to go? And I said, you know what? If the plane leaves, I'm on it. That's all I can tell you. That's what I believe. So based on that, I went to the Philippines. There was a lot of stories. I'll give you this first part, and I'll tell you the other, because it was a long journey. So we arrived there, and I contacted the State Department. And I asked them, I said, so Philippines, what do I need to watch for? And they said, well, what you really need to do is do not go to a place called Bacolod City, because that's where the hot spot of the communists are. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that sounds good to me. Well, when the plane landed, it landed in Manila. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Woohoo. This is okay. I'm in Manila. Manila is not where this other city is. Well, we had a layover for about an hour. We got on another plane and took off, and then we landed. Now, let me describe this. We landed in 747 on a jungle airstrip. I mean, there was jungle right up to the airstrip. And we landed and we got off. And of course, then it was like the airport was like a shack, a building. There was no tarmac or hardly anything. Well, I'm walking up to it, and it has a sign, the name of the city on a sign, and this is all like wood, okay? And I'm walking with this guy, and I said, you know, I don't understand Spanish very well, and I'm reading that sign, but I'm not sure what it says because I didn't want it to say what I thought it said. And I asked him, I said, what is this place? He said, it's called Bacolod City. I'm going, oh, great. The one place the State Department said, do not go, you will be in danger because you're American. And I'm like, oh, God, what have you got me into? So we go. And I'm not going to make it long. We can do this in a series or not, depending if you want to. But I remember the first day, and I'm with a group of people. There's like 5 women, but there are only 2 men. Me and a Methodist minister had a radio program. So the first day, the guide who was there leading it, she said, okay, Mike, you're going to be speaking to the people today in the city. I said, oh, in Bacolod City? She said, yes. Okay. What church am I going to? Oh, you're not going to the church. You're going to the city square. I said, okay, you mean right downtown? She said, yeah. So we go there, and it's in the middle. It's like a lot of little cities were around here, a courtyard area and everything else. And they had a platform. I got up on the platform, and I preached to the people there. There was quite a few number of people that came, and I preached Christ and salvation that was to come and healing that God would bring. And I preached, and it was well. A lot of people came forward to accept Christ, to be prayed for, to be healed. And I was elated. I'm like, wow, this is really, really great. Thank you, God, for bringing me here. And a little guy came up to me and said, excuse me, the editor of the newspaper, the one newspaper of Bacolod City, the editor would like to talk to you. And I thought, oh, there you go. Interviewing already and it's my chance to witness. So I go to his office, and I'm sitting there, and he comes out, and he's very sober. Not an old guy, but around my age, a little older. Very sober. He says, what are you doing here? I'm like, you asked me to be here. I said, no, I don't mean my office. What are you doing in Bacolod City? I said, God sent me to preach the gospel. And he said, do you know where you are? And I said, well, Bacolod City is all I know, in the Philippines. He said, no. You're in the heart and the center of the concentration of communists in this entire Philippine region. This is the greatest concentration of communists. There are 5,000 armed communists around the city, in and around the city. I said, okay. And he said, do you know who you are? And I said, yeah, I think so. He said, no, you're an American and you're a Christian. Those 2 things are the enemy of these communists. And he showed me pictures of what they had done. And these were graphic pictures where they had gone into Christian villages and massacred them. Men, women, and children. I mean, taken machetes and just cut them to pieces. Beheaded them, the children, the women, the men. He said, this is who they are, and you've come here in the midst of them, and you are daring them to do something. And I said, you know what? That wasn't my intention. I'm here preaching the gospel. He says, it doesn't matter your intention. That's what you're doing. You're challenging 5,000 communists. He said, there are 500 policemen at the most in this town, and they're barely armed. These guys are fully armed. You're challenging them. You're standing up in the city square saying that your God is greater than their God. You are 1 to 5,000, and you are defying them. And I looked at him and I said, then it is what it is. Because that's what I am. That's here to what I'm doing. And I'm going to continue doing it. He said, you're taking your life in your hands. I said, my life is not in my hands anyway. It's in God's hands. I said, thank you, but I cannot change. And walked out. And so I went back to my hotel room, and I'll end it in just a moment, but I go back to my hotel room. And it's starting to dawn on me what he said. And, you know, I passed this policeman in the lobby of the hotel, and I notice he's armed with a very powerful .38 revolver. And I'm going, oh, great. Anything an AK-47 versus a .38, that ain't going to work. And so I go up to my room. I'm sitting there going, God, this is serious. This is really more serious than I thought it was. And in a minute, I get a knock on the door. And I'm like, hello, open the door. And this little Filipino guy walks in. He says, shut the door. I go, okay. He said, don't enter the door that way. I said, what do you mean? He said, you've got to look through the peephole and see who's there. Your life is in danger. He said, I've traveled for 3 nights in boats and even on donkey to get here to warn you that they are out to get you. The word in the outskirts of Bacolod City is, you are challenging their authority. And he said, they'll kill you. Hmm. And I said, thank you. I appreciate that. The warning, but what little I can do about it. I could go down and get on a plane, and what would that accomplish? Nothing. Ain't going to do that. So he left. He prayed for me, and I prayed for him. Great guy. Great little, oh, what a disciple of Christ. Wonderful guy. Wonderful preacher. And that night, I was feeling kind of troubled in my flesh, much more in my spirit. And I walked out of the motel up on a kind of a balcony area. And I looked up, and man, I could see stars all over the sky. There were just thousands of them. And I was like, God, I don't want to leave my family, but I've got to do what I've got to do. I said, I'm not necessarily courageous, stubborn as hell, but not terribly courageous. And I said, I don't know what. And he said, look at the stars. He said, can you count them? I said, no. He said, you know what? There are only 5,000 communists. And I have more angels than I have stars. Don't worry about it. Keep on doing what you're doing. And I said, okay. It's all I needed, God, to know that my good Christian friends back home tried to discourage me from coming. But I know I'm meant to be here.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first part of my journey.
Thanks for listening. Join us next week as Paul discusses how God guided him through the rest of his missionary trip to the Philippines. Despite death threats, he was able to preach in a men's prison and reach the hearts and souls of some of Philippines' most hardened. Hope to see you next week.